Welcome to Gardener's World. This is perhaps one of the least physical jobs that you do in the garden, but is one of my favourites. Deadheading roses at this time of year is absolutely essential to try and keep them going for as long as possible. This has been a really good year for roses. Now, we're coming to the end of the rose season here at Longmeadow, but if you keep deadheading, taking off anything that's finished flowering, you might well encourage more flowers. What you shouldn't do is this, is you see some people just take the petals off like that. They pull the petals off as though that's going to do the job. But the reason why you deadhead is to stop the plant developing seed, which is what it wants to do, and form rose hips. So if you take the seed head off and go back to a leaf, then there's a chance that it will develop a new flower. As well as extending the flowering season and tidying them up so the roses look at their best, it also gives me a daily dose of just wallowing in these lovely roses. Now, coming up on today's programme. Toby takes a tour of Stockton Berry Gardens in Herefordshire and meets the owner whose family have lived there for 5 generations.
You've been working this ground for so many years. I guess you know its idiosyncrasies, when to do things and how to do things.
They do say that it takes 4 lifetimes to know everything, and by the time you know everything, you're so boring nobody wants to talk to you.
We visit a self-confessed fern fanatic in his garden near Swindon.
I suppose one of the things that stood out most is how old ferns are. They've been around, I think it's around 350 million years on this planet. You know, they are living dinosaurs.
We catch up with Sue at home and find out if her seed experiment was successful.
Last time you were here, I had lots of old annual seed and I didn't know what to do with them, and lots of things have come up.
And we visit a garden in Dorset, in a beautiful location overlooking Lyme Bay.
The frame of this view is very important to me. When I sit there and I look out, I have all my favorite plants. Most of what is really important in this garden to me is within this vista.
Come on. Good boy. These are the grass borders. Now, the reason they're called the grass borders is because they're dominated by grasses. That may seem a straightforward thing, but actually, it changes everything. On one level, there are more grasses in here than anything else, and there are lots of different types of grasses, miscanthus and stepers and carexes, and they all have a place here. And some of them grow very big and dominant, like the giant miscanthus. Some of them are quite small and subtle. But that's not all that we've got in here. We've got plenty of other plants too. We've got gingers, we've got helianthus, we've got rudbeckias, we've got nautias, all kinds of things. But the way that they grow and the selection of the varieties and the individuals is dominated by the way that the grasses grow around them. And of course, they grow pretty big by and large. So by this time of year, it's a wall of green. And there isn't a huge amount of colour yet, but I like that. More will come through because the sort of plants that can cope with the competition from these grasses tend to flower later in the year. So you get more colour in August, September and October than you do in May and June. But you get this lovely green and all the textures and the shapes of the grasses as they flow and mingle in with each other. Now you can see they're very crowded. There's hardly a square inch in these borders, but I've got a little bit in the front. And I've got a couple of grasses that will work in here. Now, this is Carex muscingumensis. Technically, it's not a grass, it's a sedge. A good way of remembering it is sedges have edges, and their stems tend to be triangular. If you feel them, they have a little edge, whereas grasses are round. And this one splays very nicely, and I thought would fill that gap. So before I untie it and let it splay, I'm just going to dig a hole. Sedges, by and large, prefer dampish conditions. In the wild, so to speak, you'll find sedges in bogs, but they're very adaptable. Now, that is pretty dry. And at this time of year, if you're planting into very dry soil, here's a tip. Rather than watering the plant after you've planted it, water the soil and the hole before you put the plant in and let it drain. And what that means is that when the plant goes in and the roots start to go down, they will go down into moisture. They will find it, rather than if you water it after it's planted, only the top few inches will have water. And that makes all the difference in the world. Right, while that's draining, I'm going to put the other one in. This is Molinia caryolea, transparent. And the flower heads, which in all Molinias are very elegant and tall and waft, are, as the name suggests, particularly transparent. You can see through them. So for the front of the border, they will shift and move, but they won't block out the interior. That's the plan, anyway. We'll pop this in here. Firm it in well, and what I'm going to do is just leave a slight donut around it, and then I can water that. Okay, let's get the Carex in. You can see it. I have watered this. It's pretty dry. The roots are growing up the side. So what I'm going to do is break the roots with my fingers. Don't try and untangle any root-bound plant. That doesn't really help. Just break them. And when you break them, they have to grow new roots, and it's the new roots that will be feeding roots. So the new roots will grow out into the soil. So let's see if we can get it in the ground. There we go. Now, the reveal. And what that will do, want it to do, is to spill. That looks good. I'm very happy with that. That's great. So you've got that which spills, and then it has small brownish flowers, and this which will grow taller. This will grow right up here with these very tall, elegant flower heads, transparent, that will shimmy, like looking through the finest gauze as I go through there. Now, last month, Toby came to this part of the world. In fact, he didn't come to see me. He came to see a wonderful garden that is just down the road from here.
A tapestry of horticultural and historical delight. A place where the bones of the past mix naturally with the present. This is Stocktonbury Gardens, a 4-acre masterpiece in the middle of a working farm in Herefordshire. Now, it's been on my radar for years because it's a plant lover's paradise, but I also know that it's a garden crafted and grown from serendipity. Bricks and stones that slumber in the soil have been used to create it. So it's therefore a practical person's garden. So right up my street. The garden has been in the same family for 5 generations and opened to the public 30 years ago. Raymond Treasure was born here and worked the land until he retired. But at 78, he still runs the garden like clockwork. Your broad beans are looking fantastic. When did you put them in?
15th of November. They're Aquadelcia, they're winter beans.
Is there a significance about the 15th of November?
But it happens to be my birthday, and that gives me a clue I want to get the beans in.
Oh, is that it? How long have you been planting them according to your celebrations then?
I don't know, but I've been gardening this garden all my life, really, since I was about 6.
You've been working this ground for so many years. I guess you know its idiosyncrasies, when to do things and how to do things.
They do say that it takes 4 lifetimes to know everything, and by the time you know everything, you're so boring nobody wants to talk to you.
What's this, Raymond?
Everybody asks this. This is cow muck
Right.
from the cattle yards, and we bring it up here in a wheelbarrow and put it in a row all the way up the garden here.
So there's a bit of topsoil in amongst it.
Just enough to start, but once they get into it, they'll root themselves down into the rotting muck.
Oh, this is genius, because I've got my courgettes, they can rock around in the wind, and the stems are very brittle, aren't they? Is that what these tubes are for?
Yes, and also it does help to keep the slugs off. They've got a job to climb over the top. And once they've established, after about a fortnight, then you just take the tube off.
It's got a certain circus element to it. It's sort of like being shot from a cannon.
It is a bit. The thing is, that every year you think you've cracked it. This is how I'm going to do it. But you can guarantee the next year it'll be a completely different story. That's the beauty of nature, that you never really know exactly what's going to happen in the future. And so it's all a nice surprise.
Stockton Bree's signature building is this 12th century dovecote. And with its ivy camouflage coat, it makes it really cuddly, doesn't it? A wonderful thing. And at its feet, a signature plant, Tulipa sprengeri. I mean, this is a you see it, you want it kind of flower, isn't it? Look at the colour on that. But it's not easy to grow. I've been trying to establish this in my garden. It needs sun, it needs free draining soil. The flowers only open in sunshine. But I've had just, what, a decade of disappointment. Easier when it comes to self-sowers. And I like self-sowers because they give a garden a naturalistic look. There's cow parsley, a great filler for May into early June. Of course, it's a little echo of the Hereford hedgerows. Beautiful thing. And at its feet, one of its cousins. It's got a terrible Latin name. It's called Smyrnium perfoliatum. But this is a floristry dream of a flower and beautiful in a border. And if you can grow foxgloves, you can grow this. And it's dead easy to grow because, like a foxglove, it forms a crown at its base in its first year, then comes up to flower in its second. And all you do is let the flowers go over, the seeds fall to ground, and once they're in the soil, the plant will look after itself. Just come along then with a sharp pair of snips, and job's a good one. The garden embraces an ethos of waste not, want not, with materials being repurposed, recycled and mended. And guess who buy? It takes a lot of work to make a shed look this messy. But isn't it amazing in this day and age, this disposable time, to meet someone that can make, do, amend and keep good tools going? Raymond, what are you working on?
I've got sharpening out some shears.
OK.
They're sheep shears. They passed it as far as using for the sheep, but they're quite good enough for cutting the grass.
All the tricks. How long have you had them?
Well, I should think they're probably, well, might be 80, 90 years old. Even our terracotta pots are recycled, so we can grind them up into a fine dust, which we can dress the pots with. And I love building, so every stone that was ploughed up in the field, I would bring back and build a feature with it. The idea is to try and make it look as if it happened just by accident.
The farm used to serve an old priory. But this isn't the remnants of that. This is a relatively box-fresh building created from old stones on the farm. And with a prospect over the distant Black Mountains, it's a ruin with a view. This is a cannonball from the Battle of Waterloo, a family heirloom apparently. And Raymond has turned it into a lock for his gate. There is nothing he doesn't reuse. The green greenhouse, the engine rooms of the garden. Even in here, there's features created by Raymond. This is an old millstone. Oh, look at this. Nicotiana, or tobacco. Now, this is a plant associated with Victorian greenhouses because of its practicality. In the evening, you get beautiful perfume on the flowers, but during the day, the stems on this are tacky. So it's like a living flypaper catching aphids. Peaches on the wall, you'd expect to see them, but perhaps not the utilitarian potatoes. This is definitely Raymond's greenhouse. The dingle is where Raymond's approach, I think, comes together. Bear in mind, this was once pasture with cattle on it. But now, with its babbling streams, outcrops of stone, you could be in a sheltered valley on a moor. It's just extraordinary. Have you always had a passion for plants?
I think so. And I stole an iris from school when I was a lad, and I still got it here today, and it's still growing well and doing well.
In the 70 years you've been gardening here, what have you learned from Mother Nature?
That she always has the upper hand at the end of the day. But it's a game worth playing with her, and it's a wonderful, wonderful life.
I feel like I've learnt from a master today. In a world that's endlessly hungry for the next best thing, Raymond, even with his 70 years of gardening, is like a breath of fresh air. He treats his tools, he treats Mother Nature, he treats the land with respect. And respect is what I have for him.
What is so attractive about that, as well as a wonderful garden, is this idea of real, slow, lasting care and a sense of things mattering, but in a gentle, humble way. And it's really inspiring. No, we're going in here, Ned. Come on, look. When I went to Gardener's World Live the other week, I indulged myself. I thought I'd buy myself a present, or at least actually a number of presents. Got a birthday coming up soon, so I thought I'd go with it. And what I bought was some scented leaf pelargoniums. These are plants that when you rub their leaves, they have really strong fragrance. And the beauty of it is a whole range from chocolate to roses to citrus, all kinds. And this is a really good example because this one is called Old Spice. This does smell like aftershave. Now that's a good or a bad thing depending on how you feel about it. But it's completely fascinating and got a tiny little white flower. So very happy to have that. This is an oak leaf one, royal oak, and it has a curious, almost piney scent. Now, this is a new variety that has been bred called Pink Capricorn. It has a curiously, it's actually quite a delicate smell. It's a cross between lemony and rose, if that makes any sense. This is Pelargonium tomentosum. Tiny little sprays of flowers, great big felted, very soft leaves, which are strongly minty. Now, this you could cut back now and stop getting too leggy, although personally I rather like them sprawling. I like the way that they all have different shapes, so I'm going to keep them as they are. I'm going to pot these up into terracotta pots, partly because they look nicer, and also partly because it will suit the plants better. These are South African plants. They come from the fynbos. I've seen them growing there. And they're exposed to full light in summer. Poor soils, they cope with that too. What they don't like is extreme cold in winter or extreme wet. So basically these need to be kept frost-free if you can, and also dry in winter. I'm going to use a compost mix which is very straightforward and you don't need to elaborate on it, but this is a bark-based compost with some added sieved garden compost, some grit and some perlite. Good drainage, doesn't have to be too rich. When you are filling a pot with anything, but particularly this sort of thing, never fill right to the brim, because if it dries out and you go to water and it's filled to the brim, the water just bounces off. You've got to give it just a little space for the water to pool a bit. If you don't have a greenhouse, these will do very well on a windowsill in winter. But I'm going to pot up the rest, but one other little tip I want to do before I do that is this. Now, you wouldn't think this had much to do with gardening, but the people that I bought these off showed me this, is you get the leaves of your favourite scented leaf pelargonium and put some in a jar of sugar. Leave it in there for a few days, and then when you next bake a cake, it will delicately infuse a sponge cake with either rose or lemon or mint or whatever it is you want. And they gave me a piece of cake that they had made using this technique, and it was absolutely delicious. So I'm definitely going to try this. I confess that when I saw this Felicifolium at Gardens Wildlife, I thought it was a fern. Very happy that it's a pelargonium, although I do love ferns. But having said that, I don't love them as much or with the same intensity as the gardener we went to visit down in Wiltshire.
I wouldn't have thought for a million years that I would be this involved in a plant species. 15 years ago, I remember picking up ferns in the garden centre thinking, what are these strange plants? The interest came when I started working at my old job. One site had a bed that was full of ferns, and one year we just decided to lift and split, and before doing that I thought, I better read up, make sure I'm doing it right. That was it. As soon as I'd started, I realised what a big world there was to ferns. I'm Neil Frame. I'm a fern fanatic. I would love to live, if I had the chance, in a cabin in a little woodland. We're on a housing estate here, not far from Swindon, but with the trees in full leaf, you wouldn't even know it. I suppose one of the things that stood out most is how old ferns are. They're just ancient, they're prehistoric, you know, they've been around, I think it's around 350 million years on this planet. You know, they are living dinosaurs. They're an incredibly versatile plant. They're suited to any style of garden, really. I think that is due to the fact that they are found in so many locations across the world, barring Antarctica, which just shows what a successful plant group they are. So this is the soft shield fern, Polystichum certiferum. And the great thing about Polystichums is they just tolerate dry shade once established. It's just such a graceful, beautiful looking fern. So this is Asplenium scolopendrium, commonly known as the hart's tongue fern. Despite its more tropical look, it will withstand really heavy minus temperatures and just come back with ease. It does hold on to its shape and its form well into winter. So it's a great fern to have in the garden when more deciduous ferns are dying back. Ferns are an incredibly good plant to have in pots. This is Blechnum spicant. Common name is the hard fern. It gets that name from the texture of the fronds. They're a lot more rigid and rough compared to a lot of ferns. This is a more acidic-loving fern. My garden is really quite alkaline, so if I was to plant this out in the ground, it wouldn't last a year. Stick this pot full of ericaceous soil, and it's happy as anything in there. So there's 37 more common species of fern in the UK, and amongst those, there are hundreds of variations, varieties and cultivars. Some people may say they all look the same. You can kind of see where they're coming from, but you really have to look closer because the devil is really in the detail. So you have the blade, which is the green part. The stipe is the stalk coming from the ground. So with the stipe and the blade, that is the frond. The differences in frond structures can be seen on these ferns here. So this one, you have the frond, and then it is divided once, also known as pinnate. This fern, you can see, is bipinnate. You have the side pinna, which is then divided into pinnules. And we have this frond here, which is tripinnate. So you have the frond, which is divided up into the pinna on the side. Off the pinna, you have the pinnules, and then the pinnules themselves are divided up into pinnulets. I really started to go out and look for ferns in the wild when I joined the British Pteridological Society. In the wild, ferns don't produce seeds like flowering plants. They don't need to be pollinated. They can just reproduce by spore by themselves. It's probably one of the main reasons that ferns have been on this planet for such a long period. This is how you propagate from spores. Cleanliness is key. So we've got some pots that have been in the dishwasher, and the compost is sieved fine composted bark. And then we need to sterilise the soil. Piece of kitchen roll, boiled water, and you just pour it over the top and allow it to run through. You want to leave the kitchen roll in place so that no foreign bodies get onto the soil. So once it's cooled down, you can then place it in a bag. If you look on the underside of the fronds of a fern at certain times of year, you might see small circular structures called sori. These sori produce spores which float away in the air. Once you're ready to sow the spores, it's just a matter of tap onto the soil surface, and that is all you need. A little bit goes a long, long way. Within a couple of months, you'd hope to see a green film where the spore has actually germinated. It will look a bit like a moss, which is the gametophyte. So the gametophyte has both male and female sexual reproductive parts. Once that is fertilised, it could take anywhere up to 2 years for the first frond to start appearing. Definitely worth the wait, because one good thing about sowing with spores, it could just throw up complete different variations and, yeah, new varieties. Ferns, they remind me of the wilderness, a time before humans were even on the planet. Be wandering around amongst them expecting to see like a velociraptor run past. It's just primal feeling from them. Love being around them.
I love ferns too, although I don't share Neil's complete fascination with the detail. But what I particularly love about them, and use a lot here at Longmeadow, is the way that they create a combination of a green backdrop, and visually they're soft, they loosen things up. And the fact that they can do that in deep shade makes them, I think, invaluable for any garden. It's time to harvest garlic. I've got elephant garlic here and some hardneck garlic, the tops of which are completely browned off, which I planted in October. I normally like to plant in September if I can, but I couldn't get hold of any clothes. And you can see it's grown enormous. We've got the flower heads opening. These are edible alliums. You know that garlic is ready to harvest when the foliage starts to die back. Now, when you're harvesting garlic, don't just yank them out the ground. You need to dig them out. And remember that they're planted quite deep. They're not like onion sets or shallots. They need carefully lifting out. Now, elephant garlic is much bigger than normal garlic, or should be. That's not particularly big. And technically, it's a member of the leek family. But in practice, you use it like garlic, but although it's bigger, it's milder. Now, these are actually quite small for elephant garlic, and that's probably because it's been so dry. Although garlic is associated with Mediterranean food and heat, it actually likes plenty of moisture when it's growing. And the reason I like elephant garlic is because it's slightly milder, it stores really well, and so it's easier to use. You can use it with a bigger variety of things. It doesn't dominate in the way that garlic can do. At this stage, you don't want to damage the roots. Leave them on there. Because in order to store, these need to dry out. Now, this was a variety called Cork White, which, if I look at that, that has rotted. That's no good. Interesting. Interesting. No, look. That's completely horrible. Look how that's rotted. And the cloves are in there, but I don't think they would keep. What I'm rubbing away is slimy. Yeah, no. No, 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 no. What I'm asking myself is why this garlic, hardneck garlic, from a very reputable supplier, for the first time ever since I've grown garlic, is no good. It's rotting. It's difficult to see now whether it's got a virus or whether it's got a fungal problem. But the elephant garlic, in the same bed, with the same growing conditions, is untouched and fine. I don't know. What I do know is, whilst it's not a total disaster, I definitely will not grow garlic in this particular bed for at least another 3 years. So if it's a fungus, if there are any spores in the soil, or if there's a virus, then at least that won't remain in the soil, and by the time I come back to this bed, it'll be gone. Now, we're going to Swansea, because a few weeks ago, we went down to visit Sue in her own garden.
It's midsummer, and because we've had such a hot spring, everything's coming along nicely. The roses are blooming in the garden, the borders are full of flowers, and my Tumbling Tom bush tomatoes, which I planted earlier this year, are looking fabulous, and I haven't had to do anything to them. They've got lots of lovely fruit on. I've also grown some cordon tomatoes, so I'm being able to have a taste test later on in the year. Over the years, I've realised that if I want my garden to look as flowery as possible for as long as possible, I've got to do a midsummer refresh. And last year I grew these. These are amaranth, but I grew them as a vegetable, and they were so beautiful. I thought they'd look great in a border. So I saved the seeds, I've grown some on, and I'm going to plant them. These flowered right through to October last year, so they really are good value. Now, I've grown them from seed. They've got a nice root system on, and I'm going to place them along the border at varying intervals. And what I hope will happen is when the hydrangeas flower above and they start to fade, their colour will complement this rich burgundy, and it's going to look wonderful. I'm going to water these in later, but for the moment I'm going to cut back the lead flower, or pinch out, but I've got to use scissors. This will make the plant bushier. I'll probably have smaller flowers, but I'll have more of them. And the plant's going to grow to quite a size, so I'm hoping as they're going to be planted all the way along here, there's going to be quite an impact. Last time you were here, I did a bit of an experiment. I had lots of old annual seed and I didn't know what to do with them. So I sowed them all on this bed. And lots of things have come up. One of the packets was a 40-year-old statice plant. And I didn't really know what they were going to look like. And I knew they had sort of thistly leaves. So I left a couple of plants in hoping that that was those. But these are definitely weeds and they're going to come out. But generally, it's been quite a success. It's mainly the newer seeds that have done well. Echiums, cosmos, poppies. And down below here, I don't know how they got in there. I've even got some lettuce. Oh, out it comes. I've got this lovely green abundance at the moment, but soon it's going to be full of flowers. And there's some plants I still don't recognise, so there's still that element of excitement to come. I've been thinking about getting a pond for a long time, but the thing that put me off is having a great big space in the garden that would be unmanageable. And then I found this tub, which I think is an old washing tub, and I thought it would be ideal. I want to get wildlife in the garden because I want more frogs to eat the slugs that eat my lettuce. But I also want it to be at the right height for me, so I've put it on a table so the animals can get out. I've made a little bridge over to the rest of the garden. I don't know about ponds, so I went to Malvern and got lots of great advice. And I've stored the plants that I bought there in this enamel bowl, which, if you were really short of space, would make a lovely pond in itself. So the first one is a bulrush. I love the structural form of this, with its long stems. And it can take up to 35 centimetres, its growing point, under the water. Now, I'm a bit nerdy, so I've got a ruler to check. Now, I'm about 25 centimetres in depth, so this is going to be fine here. I'm also going to add a variegated form of water pennywort, which I think is rather pretty. I've wanted this plant ever since I started thinking about a wildlife pond. This is Animopsis californica, and it has beautiful white flowers, and it likes to sit about 5 centimetres below the water level. My final one is hornwort, which is an oxygenator. And it's got a weight on the bottom, and literally, it's very easy. Just throw it in, sits at the bottom of the pond, and the fronds will float up. And it gives, you know, a bit of shade and a bit of cover and a bit of life at the lower level for any insects that come into the pond. And I'm going to fill this up with fresh rainwater. And I'm very excited. I've kept the plants to a minimum so I can give them my full attention. And let's see what happens. One of my first memories of the peace that trees can bring was lying under the dappled shade of my grandfather's walnut tree. My grandfather took a walnut and grew a tree for my father. My father did the same for me, and now I want to do the same for my son, making 4 generations of walnut trees. To do this, I need to plan ahead, and the walnut tree doesn't always give me walnuts. But this year it has. Look, they're beautiful. They're just beginning to develop. And this will be the husk, and inside will be the nut. Now, we like nuts, but so do squirrels. So I'm going to need to protect these with a chicken wire contraption later on. And in the autumn, they'll be ready to harvest and go on to the next stage. And I like to imagine that in 15 years' time, my grandchildren will be sitting under the shady leaves of the walnut tree in their summers. When there's rain forecast or I'm going away on holiday, it's the time I choose to preserve my roses by drying them so that I can have them all through the winter. And I like to choose a nice open rose. This is Sweet Honey. It was a Rose of the Year in 2020. It's a Floribunda. It flowers throughout the summer. It's got a delicious scent, but it can't make up its mind whether it's apricot or pink as it changes. Dehydrate flowers hung up in a dry place for a couple of weeks, but I prefer to use a dehydrator. I originally used this for food, but now I'm absolutely loving dehydrating flowers. As soon as you pick them, they need to go into the dehydrator. I put mine on for about 10 hours at 35 degrees. And here's my Blue Peter moment. I dehydrated Sweet Honey Rose last night, and look how beautiful this is. Let's compare it with this one. The dehydrated rose is smaller, it's firmer, and it's slightly changed colour, but they both still smell delicious. And so this is a great way of, in the winter when it's a bit gloomy, bringing summer back into your house.
I've got a dehydrator, but I've only ever used it for chilies, and it works really well. But maybe roses, maybe that's the next step. The opium poppies here in the Jewel Garden are exceptionally good this year. And the exception is caused because we've dug up the Jewel Garden, moved all the plants, and it's the digging that is the crucial thing. Because poppy seed is triggered into germination by exposure to light. It can lie dormant in the soil for years, even 100 years or more. And I know that we haven't sown or planted out any opium poppies for at least 10 years. Now, there's one non-negotiable rule about the Jewel Garden. No white allowed. And there we've got a rogue white. So we snip it out. I'll stick it in a vase. And the reason I'm doing that is partly because the white offends my jewel palate, but also because they hybridize. And I don't want this hybridizing with a jewel color. And what you end up is with these very pretty pink and white flowers, which are not right for in here. They'd be brilliant in the cottage garden, where I've got another set of poppies. We do have a few opium poppies that are self-seeded here in the cottage garden, but much more relevantly, we have oriental poppies. Now these, unlike the opium poppies, are not annuals, they're perennials. They flower at their best in May and just into June a little bit. And I've got two either side of the path here called Patty's Plum. Now Patty's Plum is famous for its smoky, grey, purpley colour, and it can vary hugely to a real plum purple to a muddy, almost brown sometimes. And that's its charm, because you never quite know what you're going to get. But in order to appreciate it, you need to manage the way it grows. So we have here the plant. You can see these are the flower heads. They're actually rather beautiful in their own way. But with oriental poppies, they should be cut right back as soon as they finish flowering, and then they will regrow, and at very least, the foliage will look fresh and good, and 4 years out of 5, they will flower again in late August or September. So get right back down in there and cut at the base, like that. Right, so what we have is a perfectly healthy plant, and then I've got space which I could put in plants around it and freshen up the whole area. And that goes on the compost heap, and in time that goodness will go back into the garden. I've got another one on the other side, and I'll cut that back now too, but we're off now to Lyme Regis, because last September we went down there to visit the spectacular garden of Erica Savory.
This garden really means absolutely everything to me. I think it's quite sumptuous. It is orientated by texture, shape and color in every way, whether it is the shrubs, whether it's the trees or the perennials. It's all about diversity. My husband and I bought the plot almost 20 years ago. There wasn't a garden. There was a small patch of grass, tufty grass, a few shrubs, and that was it. It meant to come to grips with a plot which has a lot of levels. So we needed to create an infrastructure, path, steps. I have 3 separate kinds of soil. On the east side, there's a lot of clay. The middle of the garden is more flint and sand. And the west side of the garden is full of leaf mold, and it's very easy to work on. Everything's been a learning curve. There were times when I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? But you know, once you're in it, you just, well, it's I suppose it's my character as well. You just carry on. We are in the southwest of the country, on the Jurassic Coast. We have the sea with us all day, every day. The garden is very much exposed to the sun and the elements. I have 4 major areas in the garden. The one in the south is the vegetables, then going into something which is much more subtropical, bananas, gingers. Incredible how well things do here. When I'm on the terrace, the view, the frame of this view is very important to me. And I sit there and I look out. I have all my favorite plants. It's like embracing them, really. Most of what is really important in this garden to me is within this vista. This is the sun part of the garden. It's the warmest part and virtually the part where we have sun from morning to evening. And a lot of my favorite babes, the salvias. One of my old favorites is this one here, which is called Phyllis Fancy, which is just starting to come into flower. It is sort of silvery with purple. And this is an absolute hit later in the year. This one here is a leucantha, which is called Purple Velvet. And I do have to say, nobody can walk past this plant and not touch it. It's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Leaf shapes are hugely diverse. Quite a few of them are actually heart-shaped, properly heart-shaped, which is really gorgeous. And, of course, the bees love them. I have a lot of stones in the garden, and one can do so much with them to give an accent to an area. But it's also that the stones are collecting the heat. Therefore, they are very good for these plants because the heat which is collected during the day then holds on for the evening and the night. And it gives structure to the garden, and I like that. I've been very fortunate in my life to travel a lot. I used to live in South Africa for 8 years, and there are a number of plant types, which are reminding me of that. This is a Leodotus leonorus, which is one of my absolute favorites. It will go on flowering until the very end of October. I remember it from South Africa. I think I saw it more in parks and in the wild because it's quite good at looking after itself. I've put it together with this salvia, which is Salvia uliginosa. And I started with this salvia very shy a couple of years ago, and then decided that it was an absolute perfect foil for the sea behind, and obviously to go with this orange, it's absolutely perfect. Having done a lot of traveling and not really having a home as such for many years, there are things throughout the garden which are evoking certain memories and places. And I think that's very important because I do believe that a garden needs to have a soul. And this to me is just absolute bliss. And being by the sea is, I consider, as a real gift. And it has given me so much more than I could ever have dreamt of.
Obviously, Erica's garden is unusual in that it's a fabulous situation and she's made a really special garden. Different parts have had very different soil conditions. We're used to being north and south and shade and dry and wet, but sometimes even the difference between just outside the back of your garden and down the end, you'll find the soil is very different and plants will grow very differently. And it's really important to know that and to go with it, not to fight it, rather than treating your garden as just one unit. Now, we are always very keen to receive films that you make about your gardens, whether it's a good tip that you've had or whether it's something that you think is particularly unusual or even a human story that you would like to share with us. Please, if you go to our website, you can find out how to do it, and we'd be delighted to hear from you. I've always wanted to grow peaches and apricots, but thought they were too difficult. But actually, both of them are not that difficult to grow. It's just getting the fruit to develop and to ripen that's hard. And there's two reasons for that. The first is that that family, those stone fruits, all flower very early. If you think of cherries, sometimes they can be flowering practically the end of February, but certainly by the end of March, early April, they're in full flower. Now, here at Longmeadow and for most of the country, the risk of frost is real then. In fact, inevitable here. And that will kill the buds and you'll have no fruit at all. So if you're growing them outside, except in the most sheltered areas, they will need protection from frost. The second thing is, getting them to ripen can be tricky in a British summer, however hot it is. Obviously, the hotter, the better. So when I got the greenhouse, I thought, great, I can protect them from frost and they'll get extra heat. And this is a variety called Peregrine. It's now 3 years old. And you can see there's masses of new growth, but the new growth is covering up the fruits. So I'm going to prune back the growth that I don't want, because fundamentally I'm fan training it. Partly because we haven't got a lot of room in here, but also it's a good way of exposing as much of the fruit to sun as possible. Now, what I want to do here is remove some of these side shoots simply to reveal the fruit. If I cut back like this, you can see we're starting to see the fruit. And if I can see the fruit, the sun can see the fruit, and they're more likely to ripen. And now is the time to prune these stone fruits. Don't prune them in winter, because there is a real risk of bacterial canker and of silverleaf, both which are bad news. You really do not want those. So never prune them in winter, only in summer, and only to shape. They don't need pruning for the tree. This is simply so it fits in whatever training you want to do. And the end of June to the middle of August is perfect. Right, this here is taking a lot of energy. It wants to be the leader of the tree. So I'm going to cut this right back, so that energy can go into producing more fruit. So that comes off, and immediately that's changing the shape of it. So we'll go there and there, revealing this fruit here and here. And we've got side shoots coming up here. And that one come back. And I think we're almost there. I'm happy with that. And what it means above all else is that the fruit has a better chance to ripen. Now, that's a job done. Here are some for you this weekend. If you're growing cordon tomatoes, it's important to keep them growing as upright as possible with plenty of ventilation around them to avoid blight. And to that end, remove the side shoots that grow at 45 degrees between the main stem and a leaf. If you water them well, the next day they'll be very easy to snap off with your finger and thumb, and you should do this regularly. It's not too late to add some colour to your garden sown from seed. Plants like nasturtiums and calendula will germinate quickly, grow quickly, and should be flowering in about 6 weeks' time and go on flowering well into autumn. I'm sowing nasturtiums, 1 seed to a plug, cover them over, soak them in a tray of water for about 20 minutes and put them somewhere warm to germinate. And then they should be ready to plant out in about a month's time. And remember, with nasturtiums, they flower much better in poor soil. A very simple but effective tip at this time of year is to cut the edges of any openings or gaps in your hedges. Now, this is not a proper hedge cut. It's too early for that, and you don't want to disturb nesting birds. Just take off the minimum necessary to create a straight edge. And it's extraordinary how that sharpens up the whole garden. Here in the Paradise Garden, the colours are all combining to form a particular moment of richness. You have this Martagon lily, clawed Shride, which is an extraordinary, it's got yellow edges to the petals and then these tiers of Turk's cap flowers that come down and this plum burgundy colour. I've got 2 different roses, English roses. There's Munstead Wood and Darcy Bustle, a deep, deep red. And we have the Sanguisorbra. I love Sanguisorbra, and this is Crimson Queen. It's actually going to develop the full richness of its colour over the coming weeks, but it's all part of this momentary, dark, rich tapestry that's dominating this little garden. Well, I'm afraid that's it for today. And next week, Adam, Rachel and Francis will be at the RHS Hampton Court Palace Garden Festival. I'll see you back here at Longmeadow in a few weeks' time, but until then, bye-bye.
A dazzling true crime thriller. Watch the Kim Kardashian diamond heist on iPlayer. Press red now. Whilst BBC Sounds brings you the latest from a shocking celebrity court case. Diddy on trial. Listen now. On BBC Two, Marie Antoinette, the series finale, is next.